Hello again, everybody. This is Steve Kallas speaking of sports, and I'm here with Anthony Sorbellini of WestchesterCountyPost.com. And we're here to talk about where all these major professional leagues are, NBA, MLB, NFL, NHL. We're going to talk about them in that order. We'll start with the NBA. Now, tomorrow is May 1st. Originally, the NBA was going to have some things where the teams could work out on their own, a certain amount of players, but only if the states were open. They've now put that off until a week from Friday, May 8th. And the bigger question, of course, is when are they going to open? Will they play the rest of the regular season? Right now, they have 17, 18 games left in the regular season. So, Anthony Sorbellini, give me your big picture thoughts on the NBA in terms of them opening up. Will they have a season? Will we be able to go to a game? What do you think about those things?
I think in the long scheme of things, just kind of being broad, I think there will be an end to the season. I think they will get, whatever it is they need to do for the regular season, and then there will be an NBA playoffs. I think the course of action for what they should do would be a minimum of regular season games, have like a week and a half, possibly even 2 weeks, kind of freshers, because there's a couple of tight races fighting for the last playoff spot. So you go in, get those, of course, give the guys even more, get them even more in game shape, even though, yes, they're at the tail end of the season, but, you take a month off, you can see what that does to you, even though they're world-class athletes, they're all in shape. But I think there will be a resume to the season at some point. I think it's going to come, if I had to guess, mid-May to early June, to June 1st even. Maybe even if you just open up at the middle of May, just do the remaining time for May to close out your regular season, then you start playoffs right then and there. I know Steve, you and I were just talking off camera, one big thing that people are touching about is the overlap between the end of this season and when the next season starts. And basketball has kind of always been the sport to where you're not really playing back-to-back. It's like one game, and then you have a day off, and then you play the other game, and then you have like 1 or 2 days off. I think they need to adapt the baseball style aspect in a little bit. I think that whenever they're in the same city, you just play those games back-to-back, and then you have your travel day, and then you go into those games back-to-back-to-back, travel day, back-to-back. So you get those games in as quickly as possible, so that hopefully when things do return somewhat to normal in the fall, that the 2020-21 season isn't impacted in any way. And in terms of, fans going to games, I think there's no chance in hell that these stadiums are going to be open to the general public. It has to be essential personnel. It has to be, team people, coaches, organizational staff. I would say very even limited TV staff, probably just the general networks, whether it be like an ESPN, Turner, whoever it may be, try to keep it limited to a minimum. But, we'll see.
Well, I know Commissioner Silver said there's practical things to look at, and he's right. He's a pretty bright guy. But he talked about having testing of all the players, for example. He talked about the fact that you just alluded to. You have to have a second training camp. You don't know how long that's going to be, but you can't just throw them out on the court. But I think you're also right. Looking at the back end of this season, if there is a season, you have to be careful not to mess up next season. And you'll recall guys who played deep into the playoffs one year would even complain the next year. Mm-hmm. Michael Jordan through all those championship years, for example, or LeBron making the finals every year with the Cavaliers. That kind of wears on you, and that's just playing the regular NBA season and then the playoffs, so you're playing in June. Mm-hmm. It'll be hard-pressed that this doesn't go until, with the playoffs, I'm going to say August at least. And they're going to have to do some fine balancing to see whether or not this will really work. It's going to be interesting. I agree with you. Has to be with no fans. But there's so much TV money in all of these sports. And by this point, I'm sure we'd all take anything without fans as long as it was a major league sport.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. it's no lie that I am an employee for the NBA and everything. I mean, I have to watch down these games that we air on the apps and everything. They're all classic games. I know the outcome. I mean, today, for example, I was watching down the game that we're airing tonight to make sure everything was all good for them. It was LeBron's game winner against the Raptors from 2 years ago, and I knew he hits a game-winning floater on 1 foot, and I'm still sitting there biting at the edge of my teeth and sitting at the edge of my seat, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? So I mean, I'm itching for sports. I can't even tell you how many commercials I see. I mean, that one ESPN commercial where it's like we'll I forget exactly, but you'll know it when you see it. That hits a special place in my heart. I mean, we're all in this together. Yes, we want sports back as much as anybody, but we have to do what's safe for, not just the country, but the world. And it's a tricky time right now, as much as we want sports and, we want them to be somewhat normal, but I'd rather, have an empty stadium as opposed to we get everybody back in these arenas and then we're back to square one, or even worse than we started, a month and a half ago when lockdown first started.
Yeah, that was a very good point. So let's move on now to Major League Baseball. They're in a different position. Obviously, their season has not started, and the latest iteration of what's going to happen has been like 4 or 5 or 6, most of which seem to be rejected by the players. If you have Mike Trout complaining, because he barely ever talks, I mean, that's a problem. But now the latest is no American League, no National League, 3 10-team divisions based on geography, which, again, you can kind of understand that. I still would think no fans. Nobody's really talked about that yet, but it has to be no fans for all of these people. And the interesting thing to me is at least the preliminary thoughts are that you'll have 12 playoff teams and the first 4 teams on win percentage. The first 4 teams in each of the 3 divisions will make the playoffs. But the first 4 teams in win percentage will get first-round byes like the NFL. But the other 8 teams will play a 1-game wildcard game. And then you'll go back to your normal 3 out of 5, 4 out of 7, then the World Series, of course, 4 out of 7. They're trying to get in 100 games. Again, if they start, they're talking about giving the players a week to get back to their training camps. They're going to go back to Florida or Arizona. And then maybe a 2.5 to 3 week second training camp. Everybody's going to need a training camp if they come back, including baseball, even though they haven't started. They haven't done anything for about a month or more. So give me your thoughts on the big picture. It's kind of weird, but to me, if you could get a 100-game season in with no fans, that would be fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, baseball is such a slippery slope right now. It's very, very, very tricky. I know I've spoken on it with my buddies on my buddies' podcast. We've talked about we're all 3 of us are all diehard baseball fans, but our overall sense is that we just want baseball back, but not so much to where we really can't recognize it. As far as all the proposals that have been kind of announced, the one that I agree with for the most part is the Arizona plan to keep every team in Arizona, just split them among the complex. I don't like this recently proposed plans of 3 leagues. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. It's not. You look at these division teams, I don't have the list of the divisions in front of me, but you're going to have some of these crazy matchups to where these teams aren't built to play against these superstar caliber teams that are built for the World Series. There's not teams that are meant to play the Yankees, the Astros, the Indians, the Nationals. All these teams, they're not built to play those teams X amount of times in a year. So it's a very, very, very slippery slope. Baseball, in my opinion, is the sport that we could actually see theoretically start first, just because of how different of a game it is, to where everybody's spread out. You got your outfielders, they're all like 150 feet away from each other. The infielders are all 90 feet away from each other. The pitcher from the plate is 60 feet away. The real closest thing we have is the batter, the catcher, and then the umpire. So if you could find a way to try to space them out, if you're really concerned about social distancing, then you could find a way to do it. But my overall thing is I want to see of all the sports, I want to see baseball back the most. They call it the boys of summer for a reason. I'm wearing a Yankee hat right now. I can't speak to how much I love baseball and everything. I mean, you know this, Steve. So it's just I want to see baseball back as quickly as possible, but I don't want to see baseball be played for like 60, 80 games. It's almost to the point to where I would almost prefer no baseball as opposed to the proposed plans that are in motion right now.
Well, they're going to do whatever they can to play because it's all about the money. You're going to have some interesting conversations with the players union about how much salary is going to be played. If you play 80 games, you're getting half your salary. If you play 100 games, you're getting more. It's going to be interesting, but I just want to see him play. I don't really. The division, the problem with everybody in Arizona, as Mike Trout was talking about, my wife is pregnant. I won't get to see her, but when she has the baby, I'm going home. And then when I come back, do I have to be quarantined for 14 days?
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting questions that would arise with everybody in one spot. At least geographically, you'll be home for 50 of your home games, at least in theory. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're all going to have to be quarantined for the whole year. I don't really know. But there's still a lot of things to be ironed out between the Players Association, as you know, the Baseball Players Association, the most powerful union in the world right now, and they have been for a while. That's why every contract is guaranteed. And Mike Trout can make, God bless him, $400 million or $425, whatever he's got. And look, he's certainly, he's the best player. He deserves it. But I can remember the old days when, I read books about Joe DiMaggio getting booed because he held out for $40,000. Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah, right.
And Koufax and Drysdale got booed when they held out together for like $125,000 in the 60s. And when you look at that and you compare it to this, he lost his arbitration. He's only going to get 11 million instead of 14 million. Oh, what a terrible thing. So it's totally different now. I understand what you're saying, but at this point for baseball, because I'm a baseball guy like you, I'd hate to see them lose a season. We saw what happened in '94. It's a great trivia question. Who won the '94 World Series? And of course, the answer is nobody. But I just hope they have some kind of thing. I'm not so worried about the format. I just love to turn on my TV and watch 3 baseball games tomorrow. And I would watch 3 baseball games tomorrow. And that's kind of how it's going to be as well. You're going to have to play a lot of games in a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, just one last thing, just to echo. I mean, you're hitting everything around the head, Steve. I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's too many logistical things that Rob Manfred and the rest of the commissioner's office and league offices just haven't really thought about. Because you brought up Mike Trout, whose wife's pregnant. He's going to want to leave, obviously, but you're going to have these players. One, they're taking pay cuts because they're not playing a full season, and they're not. And 2, they're going to be essentially quarantined in either Arizona, Florida, or whatever state they plan on doing this if they end up going one of those routes. But they're going to be essentially away from their families for what, a minimum of 3 months, you think? At least, because it's going to be typically a season's about 6 months, so you're going to say they're going to be away from their families from that point for a minimum probably of 3 months if they want to get the maximum amount of games they can in a season. Like I said, it's such a slippery slope right now. There's too many logistical things that I don't think the commissioner's office and the league offices have touched on too much enough. But again, like I said with the NBA, I mean, it's literally just a waiting game where we have to see with everything. And again, echoing with the NBA, still no fans. I don't want to see fans in attendance until next year.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the NFL now. Interestingly, normally they're supposed to come out with their schedule on May 9th. That's only 9 days from now. It's still all a little confusing to me. Originally, they were taking, we're going to play the regular season. We're going to play like normal. Not a problem. Not a problem. You're hearing it from the college football coaches as well. Oh, we're definitely going to play. We're definitely going to play. I think right now nobody has any idea if they're going to be able to start playing college football end of August, pro football, beginning of September. But the NFL does now have a backup plan. And the backup plan is if they can't start in early September, they could have it where they start on October 15th, which is a Thursday, So the first Sunday would be October 18th. And then there's going to be no buys. They're going to play 16 weeks straight, like in the good old days. And then they're going to go to the playoffs, and there'll be no week between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. There'll be, for a while they used to do that. They played it 7 days apart. So if you do the calendar October 18th for 16 weeks, then the playoffs start the first week in February, which will be the 7th. So they'll play the 7th, the 14th, the 21st will be the conference championships, and the 28th will be the Super Bowl. There's also now plans, just in case, I don't know the exact dates, but to have just a 12-game season, which frankly, I would take a 12-game NFL season because, decades ago, I think in the 40s and 50s into the 60s, they played 12 games, and then they played 14 games. And now, of course, they're at 16 games, and they want to go to 17 games soon. I think that did pass, but that's not this coming season. So I think it's either going to be the normal schedule, or if they have to start in mid-October, they can go 16 weeks. I guess the answer is if they can't start till the end of October or the beginning of November, then they have to go 12 games. Right. But I think, again, I'll take whatever I can get. If I can get 12 games, I'll take it. If I can get 100 baseball games, I'll take it. NBA and NHL a little bit different because their regular season's almost over. Give me your thoughts on the NFL maybe plans.
I think if of all the four major sports, the NFL is kind of, I don't want to say the best spot, but they kind of are, just because their season hasn't started and their season isn't scheduled to start for a couple months from now. Who's to say what the state of the world's going to be in what is it, mid-July, early August, when they report to mandatory training camps. So who knows? Things could fully calm down by then, and we could very well be on track for a full, complete, normal NFL season. But then again, nobody knows. We don't even know what the end of the week's going to be like. We don't even know what tomorrow's going to be like. So the NFL, really, I think what they should look into, if they have to do this, depending on the state of everything, they're going to have to, like you said, Steve, cut the season down. Again, same boat. I don't care. You can do 10 games for all I care. I want to watch something. I'm tired of watching reruns. I can only get so much goosebumps from seeing all these old walk-offs, all these old game-winning buzzer beaters, from all these old walk-off touchdowns. I mean, I want some sense of normalcy in terms of the sports world. I mean, and I know Commissioner Silver has definitely echoed it millions of times in a couple of his press conferences ever since the NBA went on hiatus. But, sports have a way of bringing everybody together. And I think this is now more than a time than any that, sports can bring everybody together. So I just want to see some sense of sport, some sense of competition, some sense of normalcy.
Yeah. Finally, briefly on the NHL, they have about 12 to 14 games left in the regular season. They have, like the NBA, even more so. They have 5 or 6 teams that are 2 or 3 points out of the playoffs, so it'd be very good if they can finish that regular season. Now, Commissioner Bettman has fudged it on that sometimes. Of course, he wants to finish the regular season and have the playoffs. As you know, the NHL hockey playoffs are a season unto themselves. They play 4 best-of-7 series. It really is the second season. But also, there's been some talk about if they don't finish out the regular season, if they go right to the playoffs, that they actually work out some kind of playoff schedule where everybody makes the playoffs. And on the one hand, that would help the 5 teams or so who are very close. On the other hand, you'd probably give another, 8 or 10 teams who have no chance. You give them a shot. But I wouldn't be against that either. If you're not going to finish the regular season, I'd be okay with everybody makes the playoffs. If you are going to finish the regular season, then it'll just be like a normal hockey season, albeit later. Those are the only 2 things I've heard coming out of the NHL. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I mean, my overall thoughts about the NHL is, I'm, again, not really the biggest hockey fan. Tell myself every year I'm going to sit and watch hockey. Never do. But I think hockey's done. I don't think hockey's coming back. Hockey has so many international players, and there's still guys coming back getting their testing positive. As soon as everything went on hiatus, every league got suspended. You had guys flying back overseas, guys going back to Russia, Sweden, wherever they're from. So who knows what it's like over on the other side of the world, and then you start bringing them back, it's just going to create everything all again. So I think the NHL has to really has to look at that, and I think the NHL has a very slim-ish chance compared to the other major three sports to come back. And I don't think the TV deal's going to bring it back. I don't think there's that much of an audience for hockey. It's struggling enough as it is. As much as a great game as it is, it's still struggling. But I think hockey season is lost.
You're killing me. I love hockey, but you make some good points. No, they're good points. They have a different player makeup in the league. They have some European players, of course, in the NBA, but the NHL, going back to the Russian series in the 70s and 80s, you have a lot of European players now. So I think you make a good point that, frankly, I didn't even think of. I'm hoping they can come back and have hockey in some way, but you're right. Of course, health comes first. I think the only thing I will say, when any and all of these sports come back, there will not be fans in the stands.
I agree with you. No fans in the stands. Just want to echo one last thing. I mean, everybody stay safe, do what you can, try to stay sane, do whatever, and hopefully everything will get back to normal someday.
This is Steve Kallas speaking of sports, along with Anthony Sorbellini. We'll see you the next time.